Okay, this video is called Who is Thomas Jefferson? I just read a bunch of books on the Founding Fathers, and Thomas Jefferson in particular. I read two specific biographies about him. I thought he was quite interesting. In case you care, I'll tell you, like, how do I read so many books? It's easy. You just have to have a system. I always listen to a book in the car, always a book. I always read a book when I'm doing a number two. I'm always reading a book. Usually that's a medical textbook. And then at number ones, I always read a paperback of some sort. When I'm eating dinner, I'll often watch a DVD course or an online course. I mean, I don't always do that. I watch all kinds of videos. But that's a way you can very quickly, easily get through 3 books every week. Your DVD at night with dinner, your book in the car, and your book in the bathroom. And you'll easily get through 3 books a week. You know, if you get through 3 books a week, 50 weeks a year, you're going to read a minimum of 150 books a year. Okay, so anyways, here is Thomas Jefferson. He was a great, great man. He was a real tall, redheaded guy. He was a genius. He could read like in 5 or 6 languages. He was sort of known as a polymath, just really well informed on numerous different topics. Here he is writing the Declaration of Independence with Ben Franklin proofreading it and John Adams as well. America is very fortunate to have such good, brilliant men as founding fathers. TJ, let's see, what else we got about him? The Declaration of Independence was approved in 1776 by all 13 colonies. It was very important to get all 13 colonies in there so they would be able to work together to get the British to leave them alone. Let's see, a Bill of Rights is what everyone is entitled to on earth. In the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson stated that all men are created equal. They are endowed by the Creator with inalienable rights. That's an important phrase there. By the Creator, by God, with unalienable rights. What that means is they cannot be taken away from you. If your rights are granted by a ruler, the ruler can change their mind and take them all away from you. When they come from a society agreed upon Creator, they cannot be taken away from you. That's really important. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, now here's a picture from the First Continental Congress, and this is a very important point. They would pray during Congress. In the government buildings of that time, like the Capitol in particular, but also the Treasury and other government buildings, they had church every Sunday. So I want that to sink in. They had church every Sunday. Of about the 250 men that were involved as founding fathers, either from signing the Declaration of Independence or signing the Constitution and being involved in related things, over 95% of them were devout Christians, and a large percent of the remainder were Christians, but not as intensely devout. And there were a few that were slightly a little bit different in their practices. Okay, but it's an important point. They went to church together. They prayed together. So people should know this. America was not just Christian, it was intensely Christian amongst the founding fathers. And that's a big part of how it was free. Okay, this painting here is American Founding Fathers Praying to Their Christian God by Thomas Madison, 1848. Thomas Jefferson, when he was president, he would have the Marine Band play in the church at the Capitol. So at the Capitol on Sunday, the politicians would all go to church, okay? And they'd have the Marine Band playing their Christian music. Thomas Jefferson said, "No country can survive without religion. Christianity is the best religion. The words of Christ can stand alone." And he devoted himself to supporting the Christian religion and its influence on education and in politics. TJ promoted National Days of Prayer. He wrote that all officers should go to church on Sundays, and if any of them disrupts church or interferes with it, they should be set up for court-martial. We would consider him a religious fanatic by the standards of today. Here's this painting for the signing of the Declaration of Independence. All these guys, devoted a major part of their lives to founding the United States with freedom of speech and a lot of other rights, which, we sort of took for granted, but you could lose them very easily. So, hopefully this will continue, that men will step forward and really support freedom, because there's a lot of legislative back and forth on persons trying to take freedom away. In general, you'll see that pattern as Christianity wants freedom for the individual, whereas atheism does not. Rulers tend to want atheism because then they can take everybody's rights away and have total power. Okay, here's some of the books I read. The Jefferson Lies by David Barton. I thought this was a great book. What I liked about him especially is he goes back to primary sources from those days. You're going to see that most of the old history books quoted a lot of primary sources, before 1900 versus many of the modern books. They just quote other moderns, and a lot of stuff they say is flat out not true. Thomas Jefferson and the Art of Power by Meacham was okay. Meacham's a decent historian, but I thought he's a little bit wimpy. Killing England by Bill O'Reilly and Martin Dugard, very entertaining. Lots of action. It's well written. It's sort of geared to entertain. McCullough is almost like a psychological version of history. He was good. I didn't find him as exciting, but he was good. I trust him. American Heritage 10 DVD course on the Founding Fathers by David Barton. I enjoyed that. That's one example I would say I watched at dinner time. You're sitting there eating dinner. It's fun to watch these documentaries of history, for example. TJ, what did he do that was good? He doubled the size of America, more than doubled it by the Louisiana Purchase, buying that from France. He really represented especially the sort of patriots from the South, and they wanted an agricultural society. They wanted a small federal government. He did everything he could in his power to end slavery. It wasn't that easy to do. If you freed your slaves, you were still responsible for them financially, and he was really broke on money. He ended up losing his property when he died. He wasn't able to give it to his family. It was taken away from them because of all his debt. John Adams and Alexander Hamilton are two of the sort of classic Federalists, which was really more of a northeastern England, okay? The Northerners wanted more centralization of power. They wanted a government system at that time which mimicked that of England. And TJ did not like this. He saw the Federalists as trending into monarchy, being too much like England. That's why he had more appreciation for France. TJ donated money to churches, to preachers, to missionaries, to Bible studies. He would write them letters of recommendation, helping them to get jobs in government and everywhere else. He was very, very strong supporter of Christianity. Some people say, well, hey, they've heard of quotes from TJ criticizing clergy. What was that about? Well, the northeastern clergy were the Federalists. Pastors were very influential in those days. They were Protestant pastors. There was no tax exemption, nonprofit organization type effect on them, so they would speak freely. And the Federalists from the Northeast, they did not want Thomas Jefferson's view of things. They wanted to go with, John Adams, Alexander Hamilton towards a more centralized government mimicking that of England. But the other clergy, more from the South and other areas, TJ was very close friends with them, many of them, and very supportive of them. TJ read the Bible every night before going to bed. He was a member of Bible studies. He did everything he could to make sure students had Bibles, his family members had Bibles. Here's an interesting quote from David Barton describing how TJ would judge the intelligence in a professor or some man who was supposed to be learned. He'd first see if the guy had a sense of humor. He felt that so-called educated men who lacked a sense of humor were, to some extent, sort of phony. He didn't trust them as much or like them as much. He looked at their integrity. Do they have a reputation of being honest? And I'm proof of that. What is their so-called science? Are they well-informed? And then are they hardworking? Are they industrious? Okay, that's good. So the unique thing about that was he looked for their sense of humor. And in my experience, that's true too. Usually people with a good heart that are, well-informed and smart, they're kind of nice. They're kind of fun. They want to joke around. They have a pleasant sense of life and openness. And usually the ones who I found to be jerks with secret agendas causing trouble are the ones that lack a sense of humor. They're real prim and proper, and they're usually phonies. They usually don't know that much either. Okay, pastors in those days had lots of influence like we talked about. TJ said the words of Christ unite men. He called that, like a form of universal Christianity. He thought that was a great thing. But he said that many petty pastors put their own spin on things, and those things divide men, into all the separate denominations. TJ, grew up sometimes in complex circumstances where he had to live in other people's houses with his family when they went through times of poverty. And he had a very affable, likable, pleasant personality. He was sort of famous for that, always trying to avoid unnecessary confrontations or arguments. Here's a funny story about TJ. He met a man who did not know him when he was president, and the man criticized the president, TJ, very profusely. TJ found this amusing, and he told the man that he had some contacts at the White House who could get him an invitation to meet the president, TJ. So the man came there, and he saw that TJ was actually the president, and he was very embarrassed, but they talked for hours and became friends. So that's kind of a nice, funny story. And that would be characteristic of all these other stories I hear about him. People say, did TJ write a Bible? He never wrote a Bible. He did make a condensed summary of the life and morals of Jesus of Nazareth, which summarized the Jesu Christu quotes from the Bible. And this was actually given to all the senators for 50 years after TJ had made it. He also wanted that to be used to help to teach Christianity to the American Indians of that time. TJ, by the way, yes, he wrote the Declaration of Independence, but he did not write the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. He was in France at that time. So those are two separate things. Okay, a little more on TJ. He loved having intellectual conversations, and he loved reading. His father had been very intellectual, but died when he was only a teenager. Most of his life, his family was reasonably wealthy, but they did go through some serious poverty at other times. He had a big family, and that's important too. There's a lot of other men in the Jefferson family, and that's going to become relevant with regard to Sally Hemings. As it turns out, the DNA studies did not confirm TJ as the father of Sally Hemings' kids. Now, David Barton goes into all the details of that and comes to the conclusion that there's no proof that TJ had any children with Sally Hemings or even a romance with her, but there's other historians who said they did, but it turns out that when they reanalyzed the DNA data, it was not confirmatory of TJ having been involved with her in that romantic way. Okay, TJ, he loved studying all these foreign languages, and he could read Greek, Latin, Italian, French, Spanish, and English. It was rather amazing. He would compare Bible translations in different languages. He loved, he's a horseman, he did fox hunting. He was actually real knowledgeable in theology, medicine, law, science, natural history. He wrote books about these things. He was known to other people as like a walking encyclopedia. A person would talk to him about science, think he was a scientist, talk to him about natural history, think he was a biologist, talk to him about theology, think he's a preacher, talk to him about philosophy, think he's a philosopher. He was so smart and knowledgeable, this guy. He went to William and Mary College in Williamsburg. He became a lawyer. He was only 33 years old when he wrote the Declaration of Independence. He was truly, the concept we would say of a Renaissance man. He considered laziness a sin. When he was interested in a subject, he would read 15 hours or more in one day. That's how he would wake up early and then read as much as he possibly could through the day. As he got older, he put more emphasis on exercising and walking in the afternoon to stay healthy. And he came to recommend that a man should walk and exercise at least 2 hours a day. And that kept him very fit, and he lived a relatively healthy, long life. The story about his wife is kind of sad. He loved her, super much. And she was kind of sickly. I think she had like diabetes, and she died after only 10 years of marriage. And only two of his kids survived into adulthood. He had 6 children. I think he had a bunch of kids with her. Only 2 survived into adulthood, and one of them died after having a baby. So he had a lot of sadness about his family stuff. He was the second president of the United States. And one of the things I like about him is he was a major promoter of free speech. He was very strong promoter of free speech. Free speech is good for everybody because it promotes freedom for everybody. If people are allowed to discuss a topic, they will tend to work to the truth. That's why you have to have free speech, so you can work to the truth. When free speech is censored, as it so often is, and it's getting worse and worse nowadays, then it's hard to figure out what the truth is. And that makes people more vulnerable to being controlled by an unfair ruler. Now, other things people will talk about with regard to religion in TJ, that he removed Anglicanism, like the English Church of England, had been obligatory in parts of Virginia when he was younger, and he didn't like that. So when he talked about separation of church and state, what he meant was he didn't want a government imposing a single religion on the people. He wanted people to be able to study religion on their own and choose their own denomination. So what he wanted was the church involved in school and in education. He just didn't want the government to insist on a single denomination that everybody had to obey. He was really big on recommending the Bible for all the students and other Christian things for everybody. He was a member of Bible studies. He encouraged all his family and all the students at the University of Virginia to read the Bible. He repeatedly, said that Christianity was the best religion. Before he founded the University of Virginia, all the other colleges were unidenominational. This was, for one sect only of Christianity. He made University of Virginia open to all Christian denominations. It especially initially was Episcopalian like him, but it welcomed all the Christian denominations. And another example of his support, he required students to take courses on the Bible. For divinity students, they attended college free of tuition. Okay, that's another thing. He gave money to missionaries. He did lots of things to support Christianity. The reason I'm going through all this stuff is you'll have modern books that'll try to tell you that TJ was not Christian, he was an atheist. That's completely untrue. And what persons are trying to do when they write that sort of stuff is they're trying to hide the Christian history of the United States from the people, because persons who want to take freedom away from people will promote this atheistic, Darwinistic worldview, which says humans are not created in the image of God and have no intrinsic right, and the founding fathers didn't think or care about these things. That is completely untrue. They were intensely Christian. And if you study them, study the David Barton American Heritage DVDs, you'll be amazed at how Christian. We would consider them by modern standards to be a bunch of religious fanatics of Christianity. That's how Christian they were. One learns, here's a quote from McCullough, one learns the role models from history. One needs to study the men of the time to get the context of history. That's a David McCullough quote. He's a good historian. He's not as good as Barton, though. Barton's better. So anyways, I thought that was interesting studying Thomas Jefferson, and the more I studied him, the more I liked him.